You've been told your whole life to have a plan. A 5-year plan, a 10-year plan, a life plan. Maybe you even wrote it all down once. What career you'd have, what kind of house you'd live in, when you'd get married, how many kids, when you'd retire. And let me guess, every time you look at that plan, you feel a little behind, a little guilty, a little miserable. Here's the truth nobody told you. The problem isn't that you're failing at your plan. The problem is the plan itself. Life plans sound smart, but most of the time they're a trap. Why? Because they lock you into an imaginary version of the future that doesn't exist yet. They tell you who you should be instead of letting you discover who you actually are. Think about it. Did you know 5 years ago the exact person you'd be today? The exact challenges you'd face? The opportunities you'd have? Of course not. But your life plan pretends you can predict it all. And when reality doesn't match the prediction, you feel like you're losing, even if you're actually growing. Here's another problem. Life plans are usually built on someone else's expectations. Parents, teachers, friends, society. They make you believe there's a correct timeline, a right age for success, for marriage, for kids, for buying a house. And when you don't hit those milestones, you punish yourself, even if deep down, those milestones were never your dream in the first place. So what do you do instead? You don't need a rigid life plan. What you need is a direction, not a script, a compass, not a map. Ask yourself, what kind of person do I want to be? What kind of problems do I want to solve? What values do I want to live by? When you focus on direction instead of a checklist, you can adapt when life surprises you, and life will always surprise you. Think about the best things that have ever happened to you. The people you met by accident, the opportunities you didn't see coming, the experiences you never could have planned. That's real life. That's where joy comes from. Not from following a perfect timeline, but from staying open to what's actually in front of you. Your life plan is making you miserable because it's keeping you trapped in a future that doesn't exist. Let it go. Focus on building habits, values, and relationships that matter today. If you do that, the future will take care of itself. And here's the twist. You'll probably end up somewhere better than the plan you're clinging to.
And if you really think about it, the reason you cling to a life plan is control. You want to feel safe, like you know what's coming. But control is an illusion. The job market changes, people change, you change. And when your plan doesn't account for that, it feels like your whole world is falling apart. But what if falling apart is the point? What if every time your plan collapses, it's life showing you a new path you never would have chosen on your own? Look back at the moments you thought were failures. The breakup that broke you, the job you didn't get, the move that didn't work out. How many of those so-called failures ended up redirecting you towards something better? The plan made you feel like you lost, but without the plan, you see the truth. You were just being rerouted. Here's another thing nobody tells you. The more detailed your life plan, the smaller your world becomes, because you start ignoring everything that doesn't fit into it. Opportunities knock, but you don't hear them. People come into your life, but you push them away because they're not part of the script. That's how you miss the magic. Not because life didn't give it to you, but because you were too busy trying to follow instructions that don't exist. And think about the pressure. Waking up every day measuring yourself against a timeline. Behind at 25, behind at 30, behind at 40, always behind. You end up living in a constant state of comparison, chasing an imaginary deadline, while the actual moments of your life pass by unnoticed. The irony? The people you admire most probably didn't follow a rigid plan. They adapted, they experimented, they failed and shifted and tried again. That's why they ended up where they are. Not because they predicted the future, but because they stayed alive to it.
And isn't it strange how we measure success by how closely life matches the plan instead of how fully we're actually living it? Someone can tick every box: career, marriage, house, kids, and still feel empty. But because it looks like the plan worked, everyone claps for them. Meanwhile, the person who scrapped the plan, who's exploring, experimenting, trying new things, might look lost on paper, but actually feels alive. The funny part is, the more you let go of the plan, the more you start noticing the little things. You notice the conversations that shift your perspective, the random project that sparks your curiosity, the person you meet at the exact right time. None of that fits neatly into a spreadsheet or timeline, but that's where the real turning points happen. And yet, we resist, because without the plan, who are we? Without the plan, there's no script to follow, no scorecard to measure ourselves against. That's uncomfortable. But maybe discomfort is exactly where growth happens. Maybe the fact that it feels scary is the proof you're finally stepping into your own life, instead of someone else's version of it. Think about how kids live. They don't wake up with a 10-year roadmap. They follow curiosity. They try things. They quit things. They get obsessed with something new every month. And in that chaos, they discover themselves. But somewhere along the way, we stop living like that. We're told it's irresponsible, immature, unrealistic. So we replace curiosity with the checklist. And then we wonder why we feel stuck. What if being responsible isn't about sticking to the plan at all? What if responsibility is about learning how to adapt? About paying attention, making choices, and taking action right now, without needing to know every step of what comes next.
And maybe that's why so many people feel like they're living someone else's life. Because they are. They inherited a plan from their family, from their culture, from the endless highlight reels on social media. The plan wasn't even theirs to begin with, yet they're carrying it like a weight they never chose. No wonder it feels heavy. But here's the thing, when you start questioning that plan, even just a little, something cracks open. You realize you don't have to want the same milestones. You don't have to chase the same ladder. You don't have to keep running in circles just because everyone else is. That crack in the plan is where freedom sneaks in. And the moment you taste that freedom, it's hard to go back. You start noticing how much of your stress wasn't about your actual life, but about how different it looked from the imaginary one in your head. You start noticing how much energy you wasted trying to meet deadlines that didn't exist. And you start noticing how much more alive you feel when you stop performing and just experience. Because think about it. When was the last time your life went exactly according to plan? Rarely, if ever. And yet, how many of those detours turned out to be the most important parts of your story? That breakup that pushed you into discovering yourself. That failed project that forced you to get creative. That wrong turn that introduced you to the right people. The detours are where the good stuff hides. And the wild part? The more you let go of the plan, the more resilient you become. Because nothing can break you if you're not expecting things to go one specific way. You stop fearing change. You stop dreading uncertainty. You start trusting yourself instead of the script. And that trust is stronger than any plan could ever be.
Picture this. Someone spends years climbing a corporate ladder. Every promotion feels like another step closer to the plan they set for themselves. But then, out of nowhere, they get laid off. At first, it feels like the end of everything. The plan is shattered, panic sets in. But a year later, that same person is running their own small business, finally doing work that excites them. If you ask them back when they lost their job, they'd say it was the worst thing that ever happened. Now, they'll tell you it was the best. The plan said failure, reality said freedom. Or think about relationships. Maybe you thought you'd marry your college sweetheart, settle down early, check that box on the list. But the relationship ends and you're convinced you've fallen behind. Then you meet someone years later who fits you in ways you couldn't have even imagined back then. If the plan had worked, you never would have crossed paths. Sometimes losing the plan is the only way you gain what actually matters. And yet, so many of us still cling to these timelines, as if life owes us predictability. As if we can bargain with time and say, by 30 I'll have this, by 40 I'll achieve that. But life doesn't negotiate. Life interrupts. It redirects. It reshapes you. The question isn't, did I follow the plan? The real question is, am I awake enough to see the opportunity hiding inside the interruption? Because interruptions aren't mistakes, they're invitations. Every closed door is a push to walk through a different one. Every plan that falls apart is just clearing space for something you never would have scheduled yourself. And if you look closely, the most meaningful moments of your life probably came from those interruptions, not the carefully drawn roadmap.
And what's fascinating is how the plan convinces you that happiness is always somewhere else. It's always in the next milestone, the next achievement, the next box checked off. You tell yourself, once I get that job, once I buy that house, once I hit that goal, then I'll feel okay. But when you finally get there, the feeling doesn't last. You just move the goalpost again. That's the trap of living by a plan. You're always chasing, never arriving. Meanwhile, life is happening right now. In the conversations you have today, in the decisions you make this week, in the small risks you take that nobody else notices. That's where fulfillment hides. Not 5 years in the future, but in the present moment you've been trained to overlook. And here's the strange part. The more you let go of that rigid roadmap, the more you actually notice progress. Because progress isn't just promotions or milestones. It's how much calmer you feel than you did last year, how much better you handle setbacks, how much closer you are to living in alignment with what really matters to you. None of that shows up on a life plan, but it's the progress that makes your life actually worth living. Think about friendships. Some of the most important people in your life right now, you didn't plan to meet them. You didn't schedule the exact day or place they'd appear. They just showed up. And yet they changed you in ways no timeline ever could. If your plan had worked exactly as you drew it, maybe you wouldn't have even crossed paths. That's the irony. The things that shape you most deeply are often the ones you never saw coming. And it goes deeper than that, because every time you cling to the plan, you're resisting change. But every time you let go, you're practicing trust. Trust that you can handle the unknown. Trust that you don't need to predict everything to live fully. Trust that even if it doesn't make sense now, it might make perfect sense later. That trust doesn't come from a spreadsheet. It comes from living.
And maybe that's why the people who seem the most alive aren't the ones with the perfect plan. They're the ones who treat life like an experiment. They test, they adjust, they try things just to see what happens. And because they're not chained to a rigid outcome, they get to be surprised. They get to stumble into opportunities that were invisible to everyone else who is too busy following the script. You can almost feel the difference when you're around them. They're lighter. They're not carrying that quiet pressure of, I should be further by now. They're not pretending to have it all figured out. They're open, curious, present. And ironically, they often achieve more than the people who obsessed over every step because they were flexible enough to catch the wave when it showed up. The funny part is, letting go of a plan doesn't mean letting go of ambition. It doesn't mean drifting aimlessly. It means putting your energy into what you can control, your effort, your attention, your choices, without chaining yourself to outcomes you can't predict. It's the difference between steering a boat and trying to control the ocean. One makes you miserable, the other makes you free. And when you start living that way, you notice something else. The gap between who you are and who you thought you had to be begins to shrink. You stop chasing some future version of yourself and start noticing the one that's already here. That's when life stops feeling like a constant test you're failing and starts feeling like a path you're actually walking. And here's what happens next. You begin to see possibilities everywhere. Because instead of asking, does this fit my plan? You start asking, does this excite me? Does this challenge me? Does this feel aligned with who I want to be? And that single shift changes everything. Suddenly, the world looks bigger. Opportunities that once felt invisible start appearing right in front of you.
And the more you live this way, the more you realize the plan was never the point.
It was just training wheels, something to make you feel safe until you were ready to ride without it. What really matters isn't taking off boxes, it's staying awake to your own life as it's happening. Because the best moments, the ones that actually define you, will never be the ones you wrote down years ago. They'll be the ones you never saw coming. So maybe the question isn't, what's my life plan? Maybe the real question is, am I paying enough attention to the life I'm already living? If this hit home for you, do me a favor, hit the like button so more people can hear it, share this with someone you know who's feeling stuck in their own plan, and if you want more videos like this, make sure you subscribe and stick around because we're just getting started.